Testing. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Recovery Sunday at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. It is so wonderful to be here, and we really applaud St. Stephen's for hosting this. And I'd like to just briefly introduce you to our lovely bachelorettes. I'm just kidding. Our lovely panel. We have Peggy and Craig and Michelle, and they're going to introduce themselves. And we would really love for this to be a dialogue. So we're all invited. We are going to have time for questions if you need to stay afterwards. But I'm going to turn it over to Craig, and here we go.
Well, hello, everyone. I smile because we have this on a Sunday in the fall football season, and the crowd gets smaller every year as people are getting over drinking at the football games going, I don't want to go to Recovery Sunday. It's just quite a shock. But one thing I'd like to talk about now is the anonymity part. This liturgy was based on the 12-step program. And I want you to understand that we do not have a monopoly on getting sober. So I've thought about the fact that I cry all the time when I'm talking about this. And I realized today I walked in and the tension went out of my shoulders, like I can finally be the real me when I'm here, when I admit this. Like I don't have to cover anything up. I don't have to walk through life like I do the rest of life going, you don't know who I am, or you don't know how much I've messed up. So the anonymity is to protect us somewhat of this program, of the 12-step program, but it's also to protect you. And what I mean by that is we have learned that people in recovery or Al-Anon, that you don't know what to do with us when you find out we got a drinking problem. You know, I haven't had a drink in 40-some plus years, or a drug in 40 plus years. But if I tell somebody at an evening and I'm the one when they're questioning why I don't drink, and I tell them, well, I can't drink, you know, I have an addiction to it, and I can't ever do it again, that person the rest of the night doesn't know what to do with me. First of all, if they're drinking too much, they're going to tell me about how much they drink, and they really need to cut back. I don't really care. The next day, they don't know what to do with me. They treat me differently because now I'm the ex-addict. Or they don't understand the fact that I'm still an addict and still an alcoholic. So the anonymity is to protect me from you when you find out who I am or what I am. And so it protects us both. And the other thing is that they found in early AA that the ego part of an alcoholic is so big that we want to go around and tell everybody that we're in recovery, and this is how we got there. And the next thing you know, that person relapses, and they go, well, that AA program must not work very well. It's not about the program. It's about how well I work the program, not how it works me. And so that's the philosophy in anonymity. And I want you to understand this panel has all agreed to become very vulnerable and open up to you and let you know who we are in recovery for whatever reason, or in a 12-step program, who we are on the inside. And that is, as they were talking about, they're a child of God. So, there are a couple things in the bulletin each of us is going to spend a few minutes telling our story, and then we'll be open to questions. But there are a couple things in the bulletin I wanted to correct. So on that front page it says maintaining fellowship, keeping community, and sharing of one's own experience, including public confession of wrongs, are the vital components of this work. The vital thing that they left out is we have to become of service to society, an active service member of society. We can no longer act in our own interest all the time. And that is Alcoholics and drug addicts are the most selfish people in the world while they're using. And they can be the most generous people in the world as their true personality comes out. But if we stop being of service, we're going to drink again. It's not like we drink again and then stop being of service. We'll stop being of service first. So it doesn't state that, and I want to make sure. The other thing I smiled at, when you read the 8th and 9th steps, 4th and 5th, and 8th and 9th, it says public confession of wrongs. No. I'm not going to stand up here for 45 minutes and tell you how I hurt and every person I hurt, that sort of thing. This is a confession done with one other individual in a private setting, but it's done out loud. And it can be a priest, it's usually with our sponsors. But it's not public, it's never to be public, and there's a confidentiality that goes there to admitting another human being out loud all the secrets I've hidden inside in the way I've hurt people and hurt myself. So if anybody thinks about, well, I'm not going to get in that program because I'm not standing up in front of the church and telling them what I did wrong or something like that, that's not it. So my story, I will put the first part of it in 10 minutes because you don't cover 42 years now in 10 minutes. In my mind, I was born with the isms, the alcoholism, the character defects, the personality. And they were waiting for alcohol to be poured on them, which I started doing when I was 16. But basically, looking back now, I know that I could not ask for help was the big thing. I was raised in a family that basically taught me that there must be something wrong with you if you need to ask for help. You know, the independence, high-achieving type family. No matter how that message is conveyed, whether it's being, well, why do you need help this time, or something they remark about your grades or something like that, an alcoholic, you'll find out all of us is shut down. And so if we can't ask our parents for help or friends for help or anybody else for a teacher for help, how are we going to ask for God? You know, the God that we grew up with, well, that's for another discussion. But so I started drinking when I was 16. If somebody does drugs, okay, that was in 66. So, you know, in high school I drank every Friday and Saturday night. You know, I've always drank in the most inopportune times. You know, SATs the next morning, I'm out to 3 a.m. drunk. You know, and I just had to leave the room and take some Tylenol or aspirin back then. I mean, the score went up significantly the second year I took when I was sober. But, you know, I did that all through college. And then somebody started, you know, said, well, why don't you try this? And I was eager to try anything to escape from reality. To change how I felt right now, I would do anything. And whether it was a physical rush of something daring or try this new drug. And back in the 60s or early 70s, they were being invented. You know, they weren't a lot before then. So when for the next, till I was 26, and you talk to many people like me, and we didn't think we were going to live out of our 20s anyways. You know, there's this hopeless thing about life. And when I woke up on my 26th birthday, then I realized I was still alive. I thought I need to stop. It took 7 years to hit my bottom. I was 33 when I got sober. So the thing that changed is I had nowhere to go. I was completely broke. I thought it was pretty normal to be in Nashville in the middle of the summer without air conditioning or power. You know, to me, it's just this is my life. It's not something I planned on. You know, it definitely wasn't in my list of objectives and goals as a child. What do you want to be? I want to be almost living on the street. And so I got to that point where I was finally humbled enough to ask for help. And I asked 3 people for help. Scared the daylights out of me. Took me a week to ask them. And they all said, what can we do? You know? It never occurred to me that people would help. I didn't expect them to follow through. One person was a teacher who, I was at Belmont College. We had to get down on the floor and kneel and pray together. But I said, I didn't even believe in God. I was going, what am I doing? You know, another person was a businessman who happened to be the father of the girl I was dating. And I asked him, and he helped me out financially, gave me unconditional support. The third person was also a teacher, but a counselor and a Baptist minister. And I didn't know what was going to happen in there. And I asked him, and he goes, he had just been through the same thing with his daughter. The odds of me talking to somebody whose daughter, who was around a little bit younger than me, and had just gone through treatment, were pretty slim. And he said, well, let's see what we can do to solve this. So I asked for help and went to treatment 5 or 6 months later. Didn't believe in God. And turned out I didn't believe in church or the sins of what I call Christianity, but it's in every faith. You know, when they asked me about God and treatment, I brought up the Crusades, the Inquisition, the burning of the witches, I mean, everything. And you could see the spiritual guidance counselor, her eyes getting bigger and bigger. She finally just yelled, stop. She said, we need to get your God out of church. Get him outside those 4 walls for you to find him. And then she said, can you believe in the people of this group? And I said, okay, I'll try to trust these people. Even though I was in Minnesota and I wasn't going to see them again, I was there asking me to trust, have faith. And then you read in the big book, it says, there will come a moment when no human power can keep you from drinking. And I said, shoot, they just asked me to believe in all of you to help me through this. And now they're telling me you may not work every time. So I prayed to a God I didn't believe in. And I prayed to him every night. And I told him that. I said, God, I don't believe that you're there. So I'm sorry, I'll need a sign. And he gave me one. And then my journey of sobriety. The one rule I lived by for years, pretty simple. Don't drink until your ass falls off. It had nothing to do with God. It had nothing to do with anything else, but no matter how unhappy and miserable I got, I refused to take a drink. So here I am. That was probably longer than 8 or 10 minutes. I don't know.
Good job, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. So Peggy, would you like, or Michelle? Michelle, why don't you go, and then, yeah, great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Michelle.
I'm just so used to introducing in that way. And in the spirit of vulnerability, I'll just go ahead and open up that way. Also in the spirit of vulnerability and truth of self, I will do my best to recall that I am here in church, but a colorful word may come out in the telling of my story, because that's just, when you talk about recovery, some things do get a little bit dark, but we'll try to keep it bright. So I was asking before, Craig, how do you want me to, how can I be of service? I was thinking on the way in, of course, as the selfish alcoholic, well, I'm getting some service in, so got it. So a lot of the format tends to be, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Try not to get too much into the nitty gritty, but basically growing up, dysfunctional home, one of my parents, in the rooms, alcoholic, there was a lot of dysfunction. And due to that, I think there was always a feeling of eggshells, constant autonomic nervous system being engaged. Never really feeling like you could take a breath, be it anger, codependence, enmeshment. So kind of that feeling of I could just be me and all my faults. And as a child, what faults, right? But I did not feel like I don't ever really remember feeling like I could be my complete, authentic self. Felt like, even though I very much knew I was loved, I felt like there was a lot of conditional aspects to that. And I don't necessarily, blame my parents. They also, we won't get into, generational trauma. I do know that I was very much loved, but developed I could not sit with me or my feelings from a very, very young age. Very anxious child, still anxious. This is a challenging thing. I'll be fully open to you guys. This is hard for me, public speaking, especially with this microphone for me. Very anxious, and so as soon as I could find something, as well as age 16, that could make me feel different. First night I drank, I blacked out, I puked everywhere, and I was ready to do it again. True story. And I continued to do that in an oscillating nature. I could keep it together sometimes, which was what ultimately kept me in active addiction for so long, because I had a lot of other outside things that would tell you society-wise that everything was okay. I had a job. I was married to a physician. I drove a nice car. I kept a lot of outside things so that otherwise, how could I be an alcoholic? And I justified until I just really ran a lot of things into the ground. Be that my first marriage, to the point where I had come back home, and I really could not go back to where I was living with my ex-spouse, because that situation was so bad, and really didn't have a place here, so essentially without a home. And I don't have a lot of burning bush type moments in my life, a whole lot of signs, but I do recall the last night when I officially said I was done creating the shitstorm that I was in. I decided, like any good alcoholic addict, I was going to go in really hard. Did that, flipped myself off a balcony, somehow came through that okay on the other end, and that was by the grace of God how I was able to really, I was done, and I needed that. That was the bottom that I needed, literally and figuratively, to get to a point where I could let all the other things go. The God of my childhood was punishing, was give and take. When I also came into the rooms of AA, that is also how I got into this position today. I did not have a good relationship with God, and for a while we did not have a relationship. It was actually very much through recovery and getting to the point where I was so wrecked and broken that I was willing to say, this is just not working, and I'm willing to wipe it clean. It's been an ongoing journey in terms of the ideologies and the things from childhood that still stick in terms of a God or a higher power that in many ways how I was conveyed was cruel. And it was so hard, but only through the process of getting sober and through recovery where I was able to be able to let that go and start a very new relationship with a higher power whom I call God, and ultimately to the point where I could get back in here as a member of this parish. I mean, I at one point, I don't think I would ever have thought that I could sit in the rooms of a church and felt like I belonged in a parish, in a Christian parish. But it was 100% been through recovery and developing a relationship with a higher power, who I do call God, that I've been able to do that. And so on that note, I don't know if it's been 10 minutes, but I will go ahead and pass it on to Peggy.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start differently. My name is Peggy, and I'm not an alcoholic. And I'm here to bring you the family perspective. And yesterday when I was preparing in self-will, I wrote my notes. And this morning when I woke up, I said, is this what I'm supposed to say, God? And he goes, no, this is what you're supposed to say. And if I get it from God, I'm going to read it to you, but it's in a way that is heartfelt and personal for me, okay? And I want to say one other thing. I'm going to break my anonymity, which is a very big principle in what we call the Al-Anon family groups, because this is where much of the recovery I got came from. This church is open and gracious enough to allow Al-Anon to have meetings here forever. I've been coming here for quite a long time for meetings. And the meeting here that I go to has some of the best recovery I've ever seen. And I have seen recovery in a lot of places. So on behalf of Al-Anons, I want to thank church members everywhere who allow us to have a space to get together with other families whose lives have been destroyed, wrecked by the disease of alcoholism. Because here, because of their experience, strength, and hope, I found my recovery. We use the word recovery too. So here's what God asked me to say to you, I think. I'm even going to put my glasses on. So good morning. I want to thank you for inviting me today to discuss the impact of the disease of alcoholism on family and friends. I'm one of the individuals who lived with active alcoholism by marriage, not in how I was raised, for 17 years. And I know it almost killed me, physically. Emotionally, spiritually, it did kill me, but physically I was not well. But I'm so very immensely grateful to the God of my understanding for eventually and over a great period of time, with a lot of help from human beings who are in recovery, find a way to have health, contentment, and happiness. And a God of my understanding who has carried me my whole life, I just couldn't see it. Even when the disease of alcoholism was there. It's the footprints in the sand story. So I want to bring a message of hope, because it may not be you in these rooms who might be dealing with somebody's addiction. It may not be you, and it may be. And you might be embarrassed to ask questions about it, because our version of the disease of denial is we don't want anybody to know about our family member, and the shame that we think comes from being around an alcoholic. Because you know what people say to us? Why do you let him drink that way? Why don't you do something? Why don't you say something to him and make him stop? And I thought, my God, if I could do that, I tried. And I failed for 17 years. And thank God, God was carrying me. And the message of Al-Anon is one of hope, that regardless of whether or not the alcoholic is active in their disease or sober, there is a way for family members to be okay, to love that family member, but to let God be the one who guides them into their own recovery. Because just like I know alcoholics have to surrender, we who come to Al-Anon, we have to surrender to. We have to give up. And to me, surrender when I was new was weak. It was a sign of a weakling. And now I know that giving up takes so much strength to be able to open the door to recovery and to what my higher power has for me. And I have in my notes, folks in recovery have said on, we call it both sides of the hall, AA and Al-Anon, that alcoholism is the only disease that kills people who don't have it. And clearly for the alcoholic, they're in denial. They can't see the disease. And the only reason I know this is my husband's the alcoholic. He's got almost 40 years of sobriety, and that's what he told me. And I listened to a lot of AA podcasts, and that's what they told me. Denial was a barrier. They couldn't see what was right in front of them. And I thought there was something wrong with my husband. I thought, you know, he's smart. He went to West Point. He had a beautiful 5-year military career. He can do anything. He's tough as nails. Why can't he stop? What's wrong with him? Is he weak-willed? Not at all. He's powerless. He can't, of himself, he cannot stop his disease. He can't do it. But I know a program of recovery called AA that helped him. And when he came into AA, I followed into Al-Anon because that's what I was told to do. AA and Al-Anon are very different and separate from treatment centers. And I got my recovery through Al-Anon. The reason it was killing me is that I thought I had the power and the responsibility and the obligation to get my husband out of hell. And I went to hell instead because that's what it felt like. And then we got into recovery and everything changed. And we didn't change ourselves, but we sure had people that helped us, but we knew that God was behind all of it. When I sought recovery because of my husband's disease, I really was bankrupt in all 4, I've heard an old-time AA say, departments of my life. I was bankrupt physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Empty, done. And I like to borrow a term from AA that says the words incomprehensible demoralization. I know my husband was there. I could see it. He pleaded with me to help him. He didn't want to be the way he was. But I was in that place as well, and I was ready to be done with living. I wasn't suicidal, but I had no choices left. Thank God for Al-Anon. Mentally, I was obsessed over my husband to the same intensity that he was obsessed with alcohol. Who knew? I enabled my husband, and it's a big word in Al-Anon, enabling, by taking a hit on the consequences of his drinking. He drank, I got sicker. I enabled him by calling in sick for him, by getting him out of the car if he passed out, by paying all the bills, by hiding the booze, by taking care of most of his responsibilities, and I thought I was helping. And I was actually standing in God's way for him to suffer or experience the consequences of his own drinking. And I hated him for it, but they were my choices. And I was getting sicker. Emotionally, I deteriorated. My reaction to his drinking began with 1,000 times 1,000 attempts to help him stop. I tried everything, but nothing, and I really mean nothing, worked. So my attitudes and moods shifted. I began to judge, criticize, punish, hold back kind words, say terrible words, and feel bad about myself for being that way and the way I treated him. I worried more. I got sick. I would throw up every morning because I was so worried that he was dying and I couldn't stop it. That was way beyond the knot in my stomach that I had at the same time. Physically, I had little or no self-care. When I went to the first day of his treatment program, they took me aside and said, "How are you doing?" And I spoke about how he was doing because I had no idea how I was doing. Honestly, I had no idea. Then I found my own program of recovery. And everything in my life changed and continues to change after almost 40 years. With help and desperation, I decided that I want what the people in the Al-Anon program had. I listened and I thought, that's who I want to be. I want to be them. How do they detach with love? How do they live around this active disease and not lose their mind? How do they do that? How do they walk through recovery when the isms of that disease hang around for a very long time? And I learned. I was first asked to consider that alcoholism was a disease. Okay, that's very important. My husband was not a bad person trying to get good. He was a sick person trying to get well, just like me, okay? I was told the 3 C's. I did not cause his disease. It's not my fault. I can't cure it, and I can't control it. And I heard the can't cure it, and I thought, well, if I can't cure it and they can't cure it, who cures it? It's God. I was asked to look at how many times, even if you don't believe in him, it just works so great because he's such a big God. Okay. I was asked to look at how many times a day I thought about the alcoholic, and I stopped counting after the first day because that's all I thought about. That was my obsession. I was asked to see my powerlessness over the disease, but to realize that I had choices. I was not powerless over my own choices. I was asked to find a God of my understanding. And what I got over all these years of recovery is a personal relationship with a God of my understanding, unlike anything that I had ever experienced anywhere. And I was raised Catholic, went to Mass every morning with my dad, and I had to find this personal relationship because I was beaten down so far that I was ready to hear and see and believe. So I went through and I worked what we call the steps of recovery, surrendering, finding out what's broken in me, what needs to be fixed in me, telling another person and God, making amends for the things that I did to harm other people, being absent from family, not paying attention to life, harming my husband with my words and actions and rejection over and over again, but also forgiving. Amends and forgiveness both are part of recovery. And forgiving my husband for 17 years of no physical, but lots of alcohol-related abuse, mostly emotional and mental. And he was not that person, that was his disease. My program of recovery has many tools to help me in this person that I have become and continue to become. We have lots of really good literature written by the people who walked through this disease and came out on the other side. We have meetings, thank you God. We used to meet in here after COVID opened up, and we met right in this room, so I feel really cozy here. And in meetings, we share our own experience, strength, and hope. We find relief. We hear new ideas for how to move through recovery and get closer to God. Sponsorship is key because it means I have a guide, a person with skin on them that I can go to when I can't see God, and they can remind me of the tools of recovery or give me a perspective that I cannot see. In the end, I recall listening to a speaker, an AA speaker, about 35 years ago, and he said in his talk, where he talked about what has been shared, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, he said in the first 5 minutes, this whole program is about getting closer to God. And I was in recovery a year, and I said, no, it's not. It's about me finding out how to get my husband sober. I was mistaken. And he was right. Today, my husband has coming up on 40 years of sobriety, and I would offer you this challenge. If anything I've said has spoken to you or you think might help someone you know, I would say if you want what I've got, then you can do what I've done. We in recovery are happy to show you the way, but you have to walk your own walk. God bless you, and thank you for letting us share not just the problem, but the solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, you beautiful bachelorettes. We really appreciate that. And we're pretty close to time. I think all of us can stay if people have questions or want to ask anything. And I just want to add, I'm also in recovery, that I learned last year that there's also a Chronic Pain Anonymous. So I work with a lot of people who have chronic pain, and it's employing the 12 steps, which I've also heard is the spiritual heist of the century, that the people that developed AA took the best of every spiritual program they knew and poured it into the 12 steps, and that people have found it effective whatever they're living with, including chronic pain. So I just thank you so much for your rapt attention. We'll be here if you have questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I have something I'd like to say. Is my mic on? I can't. Okay. I put some of my cards out. If you need to reach out to somebody, to Peggy or to Michelle, you can reach me through my email address there, and I will put you in touch with them. Because I can't help a woman here who wants, if you know a woman who needs to get sober, or an Al-Anon. These people can. And but we're always here and respect our vulnerability, and that we were open to sharing who we are on the inside, which is what we tend to try to walk through life and act like everything's okay, but we know we're different. And but if you have any questions right now, feel free, and if you want to reach out later, you can.
There, right there.
I'm just going to stand up. My name's Barbara Brewster. I am the mother of an addict, and he is in strong recovery now, as I am. You've told the story of both my son and me in that process, and I want to say that we were doing what you did about 4 or 5 years ago. And my son cried throughout the whole presentation. So you got me with that first lump in your throat, Craig, because I know as much as he's done in service, it is a very emotional experience when you're up there telling your story, not necessarily in a safe environment. And so the rooms provide so much security, both for families and friends as well as for those in addiction. So thank you so much. We don't have a lot of time, but I felt every word. I felt your bottoms, and I felt your strong recovery through that connection that I discovered later came from God. I didn't feel like God was with me in any of the swirling chaos of my life, though I knew somewhere he was supposed to be, but I didn't feel it personally until I was willing to go through recovery myself in Al-Anon. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else? I think are we at time? It's 11. It's 11. Just so you know, it's 11. Do whatever you want with that.
Do you have a
think-
question? No, do you?
Do I have a question? If y'all want to stay, we'll stay, right?
We'll stay, that's
We'll
good,
stay.
yeah.
I have a question for all of you after I say thank you so much. That I heard a lot about the God of your understanding, and Michelle, you mentioned like you're a member of St. Stephen's now. That does your work in AA enhance your faith here? How does that work?
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, kind of like what I was saying. I think without my experience in AA and recovery, I would not be able to be here right now as a member of St. Stephen's, as a member of a Christian community. I had such rigid thoughts about what it meant, what historically my concept of God, my concept of church, my concept of religion. And so through the experience of letting things wash away and being able to take a breath and have more of an open, just maybe kind of mentality, because I was so staunch through that process of in recovery that I was able to carry over into, well, maybe I can be here. Maybe I don't have to be excluded from this community and this Christian faith, and because otherwise I felt I didn't belong. I don't meet all your qualifications. And if I don't meet all your qualifications, well, I don't like you either. That was always kind of my MO, because I was scared and I felt ashamed and I felt unaccepted. And so through this process of getting sober, and I will say my sobriety date is June 12th, 2016. So got a little bit of time, but has opened up in terms of any and every form of personal, spiritual growth. I was, talking with a friend before this, and ultimately what keeps me sober, it's my relationship with God. And being here is also what cultivates that. So it's very, very personal, but there's no way that I wouldn't. I'm very grateful for how AA was able to get me here and really just break down a lot of barriers to a lot of staunch ideologies in my mind that I'm still very much working on. And I will say that's another big part of recovery, is that active process of kind of a self-scan. Okay, what was my thought process there? Oh, I'm doing that thing. Okay, maybe I can take a step back. Maybe could there be a different perspective here? Maybe. Possibly? Okay, then maybe I'll take a breath and try to do things a little bit different. So that was a roundabout answer, I believe.
That was great. Thank you. Craig and Peggy, do y'all want to speak to that? No?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll say, one thing you've probably noticed is we haven't really talked about the drinking or drugging too much. See, that's a symptom of our problem. Our problem is living life on life's terms, admitting powerless. I may have a power over my choices, but I don't have any power over the results. The results just happen. But I keep, my problem is I thought it was my fault, that I had power over what was going on. And I had, and God keeps asking us, He keeps knocking on our door. This is how it's made my spiritual life so rich. He keeps saying, when will you give up with this struggle? And I'll be fine for a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, and then all of a sudden I'm struggling again, trying to control things. I'm in charge. And God's just sitting there on my shoulder. I imagine the Lord's walking with me all the time. And this is almost visual to the point where I may need help someday, because I can see him. Or her sometimes. It's a mother, father, it's what I need at the time. But in AA, the three statements at the end of how it works is, I am alcoholic, 2, that no human power can relieve me of my alcoholism, and C, that God could and would if He were sought. Not found. You don't have to know God. If I'm seeking for him, God will be happy that I'm trying to do his will and looking for him. But the fact is, the journey, as Michelle was referring to, never ends. I'm in constant, when I'm centered, I'm in constant seeking of that relationship with God. And then and when I mess it up, I turn around and go, he will literally chuckle and go, I wasn't hiding anywhere. You know, that's how deep it's gotten. And so when you hear people say they can't find God in church, you know, they have to find it in our rooms and stuff like that. Okay, that's the God of their small understanding. It takes a while to get all this alcohol and drugs out of our system and get our soul open to receiving God. And then you see him everywhere. And that's how it's enriched my life. You know, I am one of those hypocrites sitting in this church who I used to sit when I was drunk on Christmas Eve in the Catholic Church in high, looking at all these people calling hypocrites. Now I'm in the back row doing drugs. You know, now I am in with this group in the front going, I hope maybe me being here will reach somebody. So.
I just wanted to parallel something really quick. And I wanted to invite you guys in terms of what Craig just said and the lovely prayer that we say prior to communion every week. So in terms of how he relayed that God could and would, if you were sought, in the process of just seeking is more than enough for this higher power. This is the table, not of the church, but of the Lord. It is made ready for those who love him and for those who want to love him more. So come, you who have much faith and you who have little, you who have been here often and you who have not been here long, you who have tried to follow and you who have failed. Come, because the Lord who invites you, it is his will that those who want him should meet him here. And that's part of why I find myself here.
Okay, that's it. What a beautiful ending. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth.